Hello everybody, Maven here, and the Edge of Fate is less than a month away, and we recently learned it is going to be based around Solar, Stasis, and Strand. So in the last couple videos, if you missed them, we went over the top 3 solar builds, one on each character, that are going to be really juicy heading into the Edge of Fate. And I did the same thing for Stasis in the last video, so if you missed them and you'd like to check them out, they're on the channel. I'll also link them up above, down below, and also in the pinned comment. But today, we're going to wrap up the trio with 3 Strand builds, one on each character. I'll leave timestamps down below to each of these characters' builds if you would like to skip around to your character of choice. And now let's break down some Strand builds. Hope you enjoy. Shout out to our sponsor, Advanced GG, the #1 gaming supplement in the world. Use code MAVEN at checkout for 10% off. Link down below. Thank you. Alright, so in the Stasis video, we kicked things off with the Hunter, and in the Solar video, we started on Titan, so I figured we would continue to mix things up and start on Warlock today. So I first wanted to give a massive honorable mention to the Verity's Brow grapple spam build, and I personally feel that this build will be extremely thick going into the Edge of Fate because of the Shield Crush artifact mod we're getting that boosts the damage of your melee as long as you have Woven Mail. And with the grapple ability, although it may use a grenade charge, it actually also counts as a powered melee, and it hits extremely hard as it is, but the Verity's Brow will buff its damage by 100% and also make it recharge extremely fast so you can spam it, and then with the boosted damage from Shield Crush on top of that, it's just going to be hitting like a truck. But I've covered this build a lot on the channel already, and very recently as a matter of fact, so I decided that today I would pull out another one of my all-time favorite Strand Warlock builds. And this one is going to be with the Necrotic Grips, which makes your melee attacks cause a poison DOT on targets, and the poison spreads if that target is defeated. But it also has a hidden unlisted ability that I'm sure most of you are aware of, but if you didn't know, this exotic gives a hidden perk to Weapons of Sorrow, aka the Thorn, the Osteostriga, and the Necrochasm. So what happens with these weapons is when you get a final blow, the enemy will create a poison burst, the same kind of poison burst that the Necrotic Grip makes for your melee attacks. So in other words, it makes them incredible for ad clear and damage. Now, as much as I would love to use the Necrochasm with this build, it actually works a little differently than the Thorn and the Osteo. So when you get a precision final blow with the Necrochasm, it makes that Curse Thrall explosion, right? And then the Necrotic perk will only create a poison burst if the Cursed Thrall explosion picks up the kill. Whereas on the Thorn and Osteo, just getting a final blow period with the gun's bullets will create a poison burst. So they are a lot less restricting and way more consistent, but I ultimately ended up on the Thorn. I wouldn't argue with you if you prefer the Osteo, but I just think the Thorn is better. That's just my opinion. Obviously has more range, and unlike Osteo, it's actually a hit scan weapon, so you don't have to wait for all those slow moving projectiles to pick up kills. So it's just all around a quicker weapon to use, which I prefer. Although the Osteo does have one big benefit that the Thorn does not, and that brings us to our first aspect, Weave Walk. When you use your class ability in mid-air, it turns you ethereal, pretty much invincible, and during this ethereal state, your melee energy starts draining. So with that said, Shield Crush is going to make Weave Walk much more spammable because if we can keep up Woven Mail via picking up orbs for threat of warding, we can constantly have that boosted melee regenerate. But how does Weave Walk affect the Osteo as opposed to Thorn? Well, Weave Walk has another ability that says while you are Weave Walking, you generate Perched Threadlings over time. And Perched Threadlings can be deployed via dealing damage with a weapon. And the Osteostriga just so happens to have a perk that applies a necrotic damage over time effect on sustained damage on a target. And this ability doesn't even require you to have on the Necrotic Grips, it just does this by default. So let me show you an example of what this can do on Carl. So you fire the Osteo long enough to proc that poison burst, and then you immediately go into Weave Walk after that, and as these perched threadlings are generated periodically, they will immediately be deployed in a steady rhythm because you got that weapon source damage over time effect ticking away on them from the Osteo. That's constantly deploying these perched threadlings, thus dealing a boatload of damage and having mind-blowingly good synergy. This combo alone deals just about the same amount of damage as 3 rocket launcher shots, so it's no slouch. And now the Thorn has a damage over time effect as well, but as you can see, it only lasts like 2 seconds, so the Osteo is just so much better. but I'm still running the Thorn on my final build because we can remedy this issue by having the Versus Velocity Baton in our energy slot, which is just a weapon that we would want on this build anyways, since Demolitionist is great for grapple spam, Attrition Orbs is great for Threat of Warding, and Area Denials in general are just great to continuously proc Threat of Generation to regen a bunch of grenade energy. So this essentially works the same way Osteo does. You just spray your GL shot at some thick target or a group of ads, pop Weave Walk, and then just watch as the threadlings pour out of your crotch like a fetish video. It does so much damage, and it's going to be even better thanks to Shield Crush. So that's the idea. I prefer Thorn, but if you want to go with Osteo, that's fine too, although your build may end up lacking range. Thorn is just amazing because it hits incredibly hard against trash mobs and elites. It just shreds them, and you're constantly overflowing your mag by chunks of 4 at a time by picking up those remnants it creates on final blows. And another awesome thing you can do with Thorn is if you happen to come out of Weave Walk and have 5 perched threadlings, you can do this. Shoot one shot with Thorn, and as the poison ticks at the target, it will just rapidly deploy all your threadlings, which is incredible synergy. And this build is pretty good at taking down bosses as well because of the DOT you can apply with Necrotic. If you ever see a boss, you can just tag them with either a threaded needle or a grapple, apply that damage over time poison, and then also apply the damage over time with your GL, and their health just starts melting away from all the poison. It's pretty reliable, and the reason that I've said for years that Necrotic Grip is the best Strand Warlock exotic because the consistency is unmatched. Anyways, let's finally break down the build. So here's what our subclass is looking like. We got Mind Spun Invocation to buff our grapples, Evolution to buff our threadlings, and Fury to help recharge our melees. And onto our mod setup, it's mainly based around grapple spam, which is why we got what I always call the holy trinity of grapple spam mods on the gloves, which is Heavy-Handed, Impact Induction, and Grenade Kickstart. Our goal is to just make a bunch of orbs via Heavy-Handed, Kinetic, Siphon, Reaper, and Attrition Orbs so we can proc our boot mods like Absolution and Innervation to get a bunch of ability energy back. It really hurts not to be able to run kinetic surges, which I did have on this build the last time I covered it on the channel, but at the end of the day, this setup just felt far more consistent in all honesty, so I just had to remove the surges. And that's going to wrap up our Warlock build for the day. And now moving on to the Titan, and again, Shield Crush is just going to be the bread and butter again. I may be a little biased because Grapple is my favorite ability in the game, and it also fits my aggressive playstyle and movement-based playstyle, but the fact that it's going to be buffed from Shield Crush makes it that much better, and it's already a super spammable ability as it is. Seeing the way it reacts with melee-based mods like Impact Induction and Heavy-Handed, although those are melee-based mods and Grapple is a grenade ability, it still works with those, and that's why it's so spammy and incredible, and I just love it. Anyways, since we want to be running a punchy-based Titan build, I gotta give another huge honorable mention to the Synthoceps, of course. Similar to Verity's Brow for Warlock, this exotic will just juice up the damage of your grapples, furthermore on top of Shield Crush, so you can't go wrong. It's gonna hit really hard. And back before Prismatic came out and everyone was maining Strand Titan, Synthoceps were the meta. That is the exotic everyone was using, and I'm sure everyone who plays Strand Titan and Edge of Fate will be using the Synthoceps. And that's good, but I gotta say, it breaks my Titan main heart to see that everyone is sleeping on the true best Strand Titan exotic, the Severance Enclosure. And that's the build we're going over today. I was so close to having Severance Enclosure be my exotic of choice in my top 3 solar builds video I did the other day, but I'm happy I get to cover it here on the Strand Builds video. This is easily one of the most slept on exotics in the entire game, and despite nobody ever touching this thing, Bungie still had to nerf it recently in case word got out about how powerful it was, but despite the nerf, it's still good. This exotic makes your powered melee final blows, including your grapple, to create this AoE explosion, and if that explosion picks up a kill, it will create another explosion and just keep chaining until nothing dies. And as you can tell by the gameplay, this is a build that just constantly spams grapples and frenzied blades, so it's hyper aggressive and just keeps exploding entire areas, and it's just wonderful. There's no other way to put it, it's just wonderful. When I went from Synthoceps to this, I never looked back. I love this build, and there was a few month period leading up to the final shape where this was actually my main build, not even kidding. There are very, very few builds that have a permanent place on my loadout hotbars because I always switch things up and create new builds because that's just what I do. But this is one of those few that has been glued to my loadout hotbar ever since the loadout hotbar feature got introduced into the game. So I'll urge you right now, try Synthoceps and then try Severance, and I guarantee you will pick Severance. It just tears through groups of ads like nothing, whereas on Synthos, you're only dealing with one ad at a time, making you more susceptible to getting killed and shot from all angles. Although, obviously, the Synthoceps do way more single target damage and super damage, so if you wanted to create a secondary loadout to hot swap to for boss encounters, I don't blame you, I'd do the same thing. But anyways, let's break down the build. So here's our subclass. Obviously, we gotta have that Banner of War as our main method of survival and melee damage boost. And then into the fray for Woven Mail and Melee Regenerate, Thread of Propagation for innate energy, Thread of Warding for a little more Woven Mail consistency, Thread of Fury for melee energy, and Thread of Propagation for Unraveling Rounds. Although that last fragment may be optional, it's up to you, but having Unraveling Rounds does help with some of the new artifact mods like Threaded Blast and Tangled Web, because your Strand primary will often create these suspending bursts followed by huge explosions from shooting your Tangle if it ever comes to that. But you'll more often than not throw your Tangle for melee energy. It depends on the situation. And for our mod setup, again, we got the holy trinity of grapple spam glove mods, although you can go with a special finisher setup with stacks and stacks and charged up and replace kickstart for focusing strike. It's your call. And to a degree, that may be more consistent, and I used to run that, and who knows, I may swap back to it at some point, but this is just something I've been trying out recently. And as you can tell, we have solar reserves as well as solar holster on our boots. Some of you may be confused as to why, but that brings us to our loadout. As you can see, we are rocking the Parasite in our heavy slot, which strangely works with solar holster, despite it only having one in the magazine. So it's great synergy to have there, and you should never run Parasite without solar holster. But why the Parasite, you might wonder? Well, we are getting a new artifact mod called Cauterized Darkness, which busts the damage of all solar sources against non-boss combatants, such as things like champions, as long as they're affected by a darkness debuff, such as things like Unravel or Sever, which we can easily do, and it's the reason I'm running Thread of Propagation for those unraveling rounds. So I think you can see the idea: unravel something or sever them with a powered melee, and then proceed to delete them with a ×20 Parasite shot. No champion is going to survive that, even on Grandmaster. And we got the Rufus's Fury with Demolitionist and Paracausal Affinity, and the reason that we aren't running Thread of Ascent is because our Kinetic and Energy slot both have Demolitionist, and then we have Holster for the Parasite, so Ascent really isn't needed here. And in that Energy slot, we get the Aberrant Action with Enhanced Demolitionist and Pugilist. And this has always been my main weapon to use on Strand Titan ever since it came out. This build cares so much about grapples and melees, and this weapon helps you recharge both of those, so it's great. And that's going to do it for our Titan build today. And finally, we are moving on to the Hunter. Now, I saved Hunter for last this time because I know it's going to make a lot of people upset. As a longtime Destiny YouTuber, I've kind of figured out at this point that like the fan favorite build in Destiny 2 is the Whirling Maelstrom Beyblade Hunter build. For some reason, everyone just loves that build. Go ask As the Cross even. He'll also tell you that Beyblade Hunter is like his #1 most suggested build, and it's no different on my channel, but I'm sorry to tell you that I am not suggesting Beyblade today. I'm trying to be honest here. I have to be honest. Beyblade is strong, don't get me wrong, but if I'm being 100% genuine here, I gotta recommend my personal main Strand Hunter build and not fabricate some Beyblade build to make everyone happy. Now, I do enjoy the Beyblade casually. I even covered it in a build video a couple months ago, and it's great and it's fun. And I could be wrong, but I don't think Threaded Blast procs on Beyblade, because when you destroy your Tangle, it becomes a Beyblade. It doesn't explode, but don't quote me on that. Anyways, let's get to the point. Today, we are going over the good old Assassin's Cowl build. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you may remember me mentioning this build a lot. And this build goes down in history for the build I mained for the longest duration of time. This is by far my personal most played build in Destiny 2 history. When Strand came out in Lightfall, I started off maining Surturacne's Facade for a while until I tried Assassin's Cowl on Strand for the first time. And that's when I figured out that it works with grapple punches, and I was mind blown at how good it was, so I mained it for an entire next year after that, until I got burnt out and started maining that Severance Enclosure Titan build that we just went over, up until the final shape launched, and then I swapped over to Prismatic. Anyways, why Assassin's Cal? Well, this exotic is just the best survival exotic on Hunter outside of the Void subclass. And survival is the #1 thing to strive for in a PvE build, because what good does a build do if you're dead? You always got to make sure you have some form of healing. And this exotic just clicked for me because it gave me the invis aspect of Void, because you can go invis on powered melee or finish your final blows, but it also allowed me to play my favorite subclass for the movement aspect of it. So not only did I get to use grapple, my favorite ability in the game, but that grapple also made me invis and healed me as well. So it was just a win-win. And of course, you also go invis on those threaded spike final blows, which is a very good melee ability. And while you could technically run the Beyblade aspect on this build, I have always opted for Ensnaring Slam. I am partial to Ensnaring Slam. I just like it more. I don't know what to say. I'm a very movement-based player, and that's a movement-based ability. You can use it to instantly stun unstoppable champions, instantly stop any aggression so you can survive better. It just flows very well with the Strand Hunter playstyle, because this is a very airborne, Spider-Man-esque playstyle. And of course, for our other aspect, we gotta have Widow Silk. As a Strand Hunter, we can't not have Widow Silk. That's just a given. Having 2 grapples means we get more opportunities to go invis and heal ourselves with Assassin's Cal. It also sets up those grapple points so we can preserve some grapple charges. And that's literally it. It's just a neutral game build. I just explained the whole build. Grapple spam, go invis, heal. That's it. And what made me fall in love with this build and main it for a year is how open it is to variation. A lot of other builds in the game need specific weapons and setups to function, but this build just works off of the subclass and mods, and you have free reign to run whatever loadouts you want. Of course, some weapons will be better for the build than others, especially things like the Call with Demo and Golden Tricorn, which I am using. And I would recommend using that, but your loadout can be whatever you want it to be. That's what I love about this build. Anyways, let's break it down. So here's the subclass, Widow Silk, Ensnaring Slam. I go back and forth between Gambler's Dodge and Marksman Dodge, but I more often use Marksman Dodge so I can spam more Ensnaring Slams. And then I just rely on Thread of Fury to get my melee back. I know that sounds kind of weird because we're a hunter and we can just get it back with Gambler's Dodge, which does proc off of Ensnaring Slam, by the way. But this is one of those quote unquote just trust me moments where Thread of Fury just works out way more than you think it will. Plus, we're getting a new artifact mod called Refresh Threads that grants energy to your least charged ability when you pick up a Tangle, which will more often than not be melee energy. And then we got Ascent to reload stuff, Warding for Woven Mail, and Generation for more grapple energy. And onto the mod setup, and this is that alternate mod setup I was talking about for the Titan. If you wanted to go with the special finisher setup for your aberrant action instead of going with Grenade Kickstart, you can just replace the Kickstart for Focusing Strike and then run special finisher instead. So you can just do that on Titan if you wanted to just have infinite aberrant action ammo, but I'm doing it for the Call here. Now I could be running things like Charged Up and Stacks on Stacks, but I opted for Absolution and Innervation for grapple spam instead. And you'll most likely be using nothing but the Call and ability spam 95% of the time, so I don't blame you if you remove Special Finisher and Solar Siphon and instead run double hands-on, which is a setup that I used to run, but again, like I said, this build is very flexible and open to interpretation. So you can feel to mess around with stuff, but as long as you have the maxed out discipline along with heavy-handed and impact induction, the build should run just fine no matter what you mess with. The grapple spam is very, very efficient, even more so with the new tightly woven artifact mod to boost our grenade stat for free most of the time. And that basically does it for the hunter build of the day. Again, this is my single most played build of all time. I have more hours logged onto this build than any other build. If you are a hunter main, try it. You will not be disappointed. And with that said, I'll leave the dim loadout links to all 3 builds we went over today down below in the description, and also the pinned comment if you'd like to get them prepared for the Edge of Fate. And if you got any buddies who you think could benefit from these builds as well, it'd mean a lot if you consider sharing this video with them. Once again, we did this same kind of top top 3 builds video for Stasis and Solar in the past week as well. So if you want to prepare some Stasis and Solar builds for the new Stasis and Solar artifact mods, you can find those videos on the channel, and they'll also be linked down below. And thank you so much for watching this 3-part series. If you were here for all 3 of them, I really appreciate you. It means a lot. The Edge of Fate is officially less than a month away, so get ready, prep some bounties, clean your vaults, and good luck. There will be more Edge of Fate content on the way, so if you are new here, I hope you stick around for more and hit that subscribe button. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.